Well, I think that you have to give careful thought any time that the West proclaims one of the countries to be a stable democracy or to have a growing economy, because they've been wrong on all accounts, because they've overlooked the fundamental fact that right now Africa as a whole, and in particular Sahel, the West Africa, the Horn of Africa, are in economically very dire conditions. People do not have enough food to eat. The economies are very weak, and therefore this creates the conditions for various groups to take control, to occupy space, and to carry out rebellions. In effect, and I predicted this back in 2011, this is a continuation of the Arab Spring into sub-Saharan Africa, and I expect it will spread to many more countries because the population it cannot live under these conditions, and various asymmetric terrorist-related groups can thrive under these conditions. And therefore, unless you solve the economic problem, which is food and water, power, and invest in infrastructure, which the West has refused to do, unfortunately, I think we're going to see more destabilizations and rebellions throughout the year in Africa. One factor, though, is in the zealous nature of President Obama and President Sarkozy and Prime Minister Cameron in their intent to carry out regime change in Libya and then kill Gaddafi when it was not necessary. They have actually helped this process because many of these rebels are coming back from Libya very well armed with pickup trucks with machine guns and other ammunition. So essentially it's the failed wrong policy of President Obama in the West, together with the economic crisis, that I think are the two main causes for this rebellion. Well, I think that the question comes back to what was the intention of the West. We supported, NATO supported openly, directly, the overthrow of Gaddafi. They wanted the Gaddafi regime to be out of the way, and they wanted to move on to confrontations over Syria and Iran. And they wanted to force Russia and China to submit to their policies, which they have not. In Mali, this was an area that the U.S. put a lot of military backing into, and they were trying to fight the various forces known as Al-Qaeda of the Maghreb. And you had a military low-level officer carry out a coup. So you have to wonder how strong was the government. But this was a government that was backed by the United States and proclaimed to be, quote, a democratic country. But in fact, there's not going to be many democratic countries that don't provide for their people. The northern Mali is extremely underdeveloped. Nomadic layers occupy the area. And the country was not economically developing in very much the same way in Tunisia, where the IMF and World Bank famously proclaimed Tunisia a great economic example, and the country government was overthrown. Because the Arab Spring, as we call it, which is now moving south, is actually a response, a legitimate response in the initial phases by people who don't see a future for themselves.